If you find this podcast beneficial, you can elevate it and yourself by going to the Products Store section of nilesheckman.com, which has numerous channels of support, such as becoming a patron to access certain extended or extra content, downloading the show archive, watching our related documentary ventures, and more. I'm glad we had this talk. This is An Infinite Path, a podcast focused on growth and creativity, which can be found at aninfinitepath.com. I'm your host, Niles Heckman. All right. Well, man, it's an honor to have Max Igan here with me, who's somebody I've been certainly familiar with for quite a while, and I'm sure many listeners to this will as well be familiar with you and your work. And you've been doing it for many years, the media that you've created, and it seems like, man, you have a very nice ability to speak on essentially shadow dealings and the dark sorcery afoot going on in the world. But one of my opinions on that is, like, you can't really fix problems without first accurately identifying them. And of course, as we know, so many people just want to not even really look at what's truly going on. But we do end up learning so much from the dark sides of things. I think the darkness kind of is a teaching tool for us. So maybe, give us a little bit about yourself, dude, and then, how you focus your efforts these days.
Well, I'm a musician, really, who lived on the outside of society most of my life. And so I was kind of looking in at it, and I could see it was all crazy from when I was a very small child. So I didn't really want to participate in it. But I managed to find a way through, being a musician and all that sort of stuff. So I managed to live on the outside of it and still make a living and be able to get through. And now, it's got to the point that you can't. You can't really ignore it anymore. We have to say something. So that's what I've been kind of doing. Just trying to point out to people the obviousness of the control grid and the fact that the world's run by criminals, and it only happens because we tolerate it and we sort of believe that these people are our leaders. We've got a whole world basically that's suffering from Stockholm syndrome. And, it's going to hell in a handbasket. And I think we could fix it. I think we could change things really easy if we just woke up to ourselves and started questioning these people, what they're doing, like the governments that we employ to manage infrastructure for us, what these people are actually doing to us, all these manufactured wars, all this whole world situation, all this world tension. So much of it is theatre. And when you live on the outside of the society and you kind of travel around the world as a musician, as a musician, I was kind of fortunate because, music opens up a lot of doorways with people. Everyone wants to go and hang with the musician. Everyone wants, if you're a half decent musician, yeah. A lot of people want to talk to you, And so you get to meet them. I've had conversations sitting in the gutter with the drunk after a gig, and I've dined with royalty. I've met all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life, and because I'm a people person, I can usually kind of talk to them on their level. I can kind of change my socio-intellectual profile to, sort of fit in with whoever I happen to be talking to and not come across as a threat to them or anything, and just kind of, create some sort of a connection with them. And I've got to meet a lot of people, and I've got to hear the world from a lot of different perspectives from a lot of different people. And it's weird, a lot of the people that you think involved in big corporations and things, and you think, oh, these must be really evil people. When you meet them, they're kind of not, and they don't really know what their corporation's doing half the time. Everything's so compartmentalized. They're just looking at the dollar signs in the books and the whatever's going on in their profit margins. They're just not thinking about these things, And you can sort of have these conversations and sort of point little things out to them, and they go, hey, they start scratching their head a little bit, and maybe they change the structure of their company a little bit. Sometimes they even just sell their companies and walk away from the whole thing. I've had that happen with people as well. So, it's been an interesting path getting to this point, but you look at the world and you get to a point where you think, well, if you can see it for what it is, then if you're not speaking out about it and you're not attempting to make change, you're essentially being part of the problem. I mean, the whole problem here is that people are not prepared to identify the evil that's around them because, like you say, they don't want to look. They want to keep everything love and light, all positive. Oh, that's not my reality. But as you say, you can't ever fix a problem unless you're alerted to what the problem is. And once you see the problem, the fix very often becomes self-evident. So, that's what I've been attempting to do to people. And it's a kind of a fine line to point out all this negativity to people and attempt to keep the radio shows positive, because that's really what it's all about. I'm trying to inspire people to stand up for themselves and make change, because if we just go with the flow and let things go and come along to their natural conclusion, it's not going to be a very good conclusion, and it's going to be simply through our lack of involvement, and we have an opportunity to get involved. We have a responsibility to get involved, really, especially if you're a parent or anything. I mean, the future that's being created is not going to be one that I particularly want my children growing up into. And so, who's going to change that if not us? The responsibility comes down to us. If you can see what the problem is and you don't address it, well, then you're part of the problem. There's too much of this, that's bad, someone should fix it. But I'm not prepared to, but someone should. Too much of that in our society. I think we all should participate in making this a better world, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, and knowledge of a problem is certainly can be half of the solution. Right there, you got 50% of it dialed down once you've identified it. And you're right. I mean, a lot of the times that you hint on how powerful individuals can be and how much each individual node on the network can really make changes just by oftentimes disassociating from things, not playing the old ways or not being part of old human operating systems. And that's beautifully said, man. It's always nice to hear you try to, as you talk about shadow things, or not be super doomy, but then identify doom and gloom, but then look at how the light shines through and how you get to, positivity at the end of the tunnel in whatever way you can. It's always nice to kind of bring it back to that. I find that empowering too.
Well, yeah, well, people don't realize that how powerful they are, because everything that's wrong with the world, doesn't matter what it is, ultimately it came from a spark of an idea in someone's mind. Someone just had this idea, hey, let's do this. And other people went along with it. Maybe they conspired or whatever. But ultimately, it came from a spark of idea in someone's mind, and that became reality for everybody else. And we can all have these thoughts. We can all have these ability to make change. All we've got to do is have the right idea. And if people around it hear it and it inspires them, well, then that idea becomes reality. It doesn't matter. Every single problem that we have, every good thing, every bad thing, everything that humankind has ever done ultimately came from the spark of an idea in a single consciousness. We can all do that. And that's the power that we have. And that's the power that people are missing out on. They think they're just little people. I can't do much. I'm just a little person. There's no such thing as little people. We're all equal in this. It doesn't matter what position of office anybody holds. It doesn't matter how much they've got in their bank account. It doesn't matter how big their front door is or what sort of a suit they're wearing, whether they're in fancy dress or whatever. It doesn't matter. They're just people. And it all comes from ideas that people have. That's the whole crux of the biscuit, really.
Totally. And you've already mentioned your music. I mean, much of this podcast talks about creativity and growth through our own creative ventures. And you as a musician, have you found that, like you've already mentioned, your music brings you to certain interesting conversations and social dynamics with people? Have you just found that using music as a creative outlet through your life has helped you kind of balance, darkness with how you enjoy spending your time and being creative in that regard?
Well, it did for a long time. I mean, but a lot of it was bubble too. I mean, it was a way through. It was a way through the system. I mean, when I kind of left the system when I was in school, I mean, I walked out halfway through my third year of high school. I just went, this is ridiculous. I'd already been kicked out of 4 schools by that time.
Yes, well played.
By my third year in high school, I'd already been kicked out of 4 schools for arguing with my teachers because they were teaching me crap, and I had my own desk outside the principal's office for my last 6 months of school. And I thought, what the hell am I even doing here? So I just walked out and became a musician. And, for many years, it was a bubble that I lived in. I mean, it was a way of getting through and making an income and not having to pay tax and just being my own person. And it was great for that. But it was a security bubble. It was, the world's all messed up. I've got my music. And I was that person. I mean, I had the big record collection, and I had the big stereo, and I had the big PA, and I had all the guitars, and I had all this stuff. I was the music guy,
Yeah.
But that was who I was. And I identified with that. And then when I had a bad experience, I went on tour for a while and I left all my stuff with my ex-wife to look after. And when I got back from tour, she wouldn't give it back to me. She said, no, you gave it all to me. Possession's 9/10 of the law. If you try to get it back, you can't see your son. I'll get a restraining order against you. So she basically stole my entire life's music collection. And suddenly, music that was always my source of strength, the place I would go to for strength to get through this system, suddenly became my source of pain, and I had nowhere to go for my source of strength. And that's when I really turned into my activism. Because all I had left was my activism. All I had left was my research and the stuff that I was doing. So I completely immersed myself in that. And then I realized that the music had, it was a creative outlet, sure, but it was also a bubble that was causing me to not pay attention and not be active in the world around me. And it was an interesting thing because my life led me on this path where I was able to live on the outside of society. I was able to go and research all these places and go to all these exotic places and look at all these ruins and all this ancient historical stuff, do all this stuff, and had all the time to do it. Plenty of free time as a musician. So I had all the time to research all the things that I needed, and it gave me the ability to get all the information that I needed to do what I'm doing now. And once I had all that information, the universe took all that away from me, took all my music away from me, and it left me with no other option than to step onto the path of activism and becoming active and sharing all the stuff that I'd learned along the way. And along the way, it had also given me the life skills and the ability to be able to live outside the society and to be able to do what I'm doing. I mean, I live a very, very simple life. And even some of the stuff that I say to people about disconnecting from the system, for me, it's easy because I've always been outside the system. But I can kind of look at people and think it must be very strange for them. When they look at my life, they would think that how on earth have I done this? How on earth have I managed to stay outside the system? And to me, it would be very difficult for a lot of people to simply let go of the trappings of society the way I've done. I mean, honestly, when my ex-wife stole all my music collection and stole all my stuff, it was the greatest gift that the universe had ever given me because I completely lost attachment for all material possessions. I lost attachment for all external trappings. All I was left with was myself. And I could have gone either way from that point. I mean, I was suicidal at that point. I could have easily gone that way, but I didn't. I went a different way. And I chose to become a shining light and share what I know, regardless of the consequences. No stake in the outcome. And hey, if I don't get it right on the shows, I mean, I just come out and offer a perspective to people. It doesn't matter. I'm just trying to offer a better way because I can see a better way that humanity could be going. So it was kind of interesting. It was a source of creative outlet, but like I said, it was a bubble. Now I put that creative outlet into creating graphics for the videos and doing all the stuff that I do. And I get a lot of flack from that as well. Gee, your videos look so professional. You must have help. There's no way you could be doing this without, all this stuff that people do. Yeah. I just have a creative sort of a space. Years ago, when I first started getting into computers, I wanted to know how graphics programs work. So I just used to sit there and mess around with them and just make mistakes and learn how to use them. And so, like I said, all the stuff that I've learned along the way, it's all given me the life skills to do exactly what I'm doing now. Only I didn't know it at the time, So I mean, music was a help like that, but it was a bubble. It was an escape, the way so many people have. Everyone has their escape when really we should be paying attention.
That's one of those. Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us, man. I mean, that's one of those kind of breakdown or breakthrough moments, isn't it? And it feels like it's almost like a self-initiatory process in some regard, where it's like, are you going to go into a downward contractive spiral? Or are you going to use that as a way to be expansive in yourself and your beings and doings and ways of, of acting in the world, essentially. So it's nice to hear that. And I think when you're down, there almost isn't anywhere to go but up if you keep your head straight.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And like 12 or 14 years ago, like I was living in a homeless shelter in a sugar town, mopping floors to pay for the roof over my head. So, yeah, I mean, you can't really get much further down from that point. And when I was at that point, I felt great. I thought, wow, here I am. I've got a new start. That's what it was like because there was no way, no further to go. I mean, and I didn't have anything. I didn't have anything left. I had the clothes on my back, basically. So, it was just, it was a new start for me. And look what I've done with that. So, yeah, I mean, it's fascinating when you look at life and you have no stake in the outcome. I mean, everything that just happens is just part of the journey, and it's all about spiritual growth. It's all about you discovering yourself, and everything that happens to you happens for a reason. It's what you do with that information. And I was a hard-headed, reasonably strong-willed person. And I was quite arrogant, really. I mean, I've always been reasonably intelligent and reasonably knowledgeable, but I had this bubble around me of arrogance that, the world's screwed. Nobody's ever going to do anything. Humankind, why would anyone even bother thinking that anybody cares about anybody? Because no one cares about anybody. Because this is the way I'd grown up. I'd thought that the world was just an uncaring place. And, that was a kind of a bubble of arrogance where I'd kind of separated myself from everybody. And even when I came out of the homeless shelter and I started, getting back on my feet again, I was a musician. I was doing all that sort of stuff, and it wasn't until a few years later that all my stuff got stolen. But I mean, because I had stuff in storage. But anyway, it's a complicated issue. But a lot of stuff happened in my life that broke me out of that bubble and made me realize that there's only actually really one of us here. It's just it's like a single consciousness experiencing itself subjectively, experiencing itself subjectively. That's why I use the term in Lakesh at the end of every radio show, to try to sort of convey that with people. But that's what I've tried to convey to people as well, is it doesn't matter what you did. It matters what you do from this point, because my life was a train wreck up until I was about 40 years old, So with all the knowledge and stuff that I've got and all the respect that people give me, I say, oh, hang on a minute, I was a completely dysfunctional train wreck. I was a very intelligent person, but I was my own worst enemy through most of my life. So don't think that you're, however down you've been, don't think that your life is lost. I mean, if I can end up that way and end up in a homeless shelter 12 years ago, well, why would you not have faith in yourself to be able to overcome anything that the world throws at you? Because look what I did. And I did it all on my own. I mean, I had a terrible childhood. I had an abusive childhood. I didn't have a father around. I had, no support from anybody. I realized the world was completely crazy by the time I was 4. And so I became very withdrawn with all that. And so, yeah, don't ever lose faith in yourself, folks, and don't ever think that, I'm a dysfunctional person. I've been this and I've been that, or I'm not a nice person or whatever, and I can never change. Don't ever think that about yourself, because even having that realization about yourself gives you the opportunity to say, wow, well, I know that now. I know what the problem is. All I got to do is not do that. All I got to do is just do something else. So we all have the ability to make incredible change in the world. And all the people that I've reached, I'm just one person, one man who's reached millions of people. And like I said, 12 years ago, I was living in a homeless shelter. So why would anyone out there think that they can't make change? Everything that we experience in the world comes from an idea that was a spark in the mind of a single individual, and you can have that idea that could change the world. We all can. Just don't sell yourself short.
Beautifully wise of you, man, to say that. I sometimes think about when you're on the battlefield or something, and there's like the med tech that heals a soldier that's on the very verge of dying, and how amazing the body's capabilities are to reheal from being, a sliver's edge close to death, and how just a certain period later you can be a fully healthy human being again, after much struggle and hardship. But same with our mental capabilities. Like if you've been down and out, or it's beautiful of you to say that if you've had a really rough life or a hard time, it's never too late to improve yourself. You always have capabilities to better oneself. And I think sometimes you hear this dynamic of a difference between standard of living and quality of life. And for you, I mean, do you mind if I ask, like, with you living outside the system, have you just been able to live very modestly and humbly and have, not necessarily that, very few material possessions, but still find that you have your time rich, for example, and you have capability to always spend your time how you want to spend it and live your life how you want to do it?
Everything I've done because I wanted to do it. I mean, except perhaps when I was living in the homeless shelter, but even that, like, it was an experience. I mean, the reason I ended up in the homeless shelter is because I went to a strange town. I wanted to be close to my son. When I got there, everything fell apart. I had nowhere to go, nowhere to live. Ended up in this homeless shelter.
Yeah.
But hey, I'm the one who made the choice to go to that town. I'm the one who threw everything away that I had here and just moved to this other town blind with no one to fall back on, just because I wanted to be near my son. So I kind of created that situation for myself anyway, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything we
But
do in life is kind of, we could say as us, we made that choice to some extent. I mean, you could get into much like more, high level metaphysical conversations about like reincarnation and what we chose when we came in. And those are things I certainly don't have answers for. But it is true that a lot of people's shit in life is self created. And, the great things they do in life are self created too. It's always good to acknowledge that sometimes people are dealt like a bag, they're given a bag of shit when they come in. And it's like, how much of that is really their fault? But with what you do with the cards that you're dealt, it's nice when people can be more self-empowered and more sovereign in their ways of being. So I think that
yeah,
sometimes hearing your story is an empowering one for others.
yeah, well, and even as far as material possession goes, I mean, I don't need a lot of stuff. I mean, but I have stuff. I mean, I've got pretty all the toys I need. I've got a couple of guitars still. I've got an amplifier. I've got an old PA that I use that's like a home stereo. Which is like a 6,000 watt PA sitting here in my shed. I mean, a lot of people go, "Oh my God, what a sound system!" But it's just the old PA that I had in the band from years ago. I mean, it's actually our foldback, and and I've got a car that works. I've got a roof over my head that I can have for the rest of my life. The guy who owns this place has told me I can have this shed for the rest of my life. So, and I can go overseas, and when I go overseas, he doesn't even make me pay rent while I'm away. So.
Yeah.
And I can come back a year later, and the shed's still here. All my stuff's still here. I've got a home to come to because he just supports what I do. He thinks what I'm doing is good, so he's given me this space to have. So it's all just kind of fallen into my lap, and I have like very few overheads. I don't owe anybody any money. I have no mortgages, nothing like that. And even if I had a lot of money, I don't know what I'd go and buy. I mean, like I said, I've got a computer, I've got my desk, I've got some guitars, I've got a car that works, I've got my PA, I've got a telescope if I want to go and look at the stars. I don't need anything. What am I going to do? Go and buy a Ferrari and some Versace clothes? I mean,
Yeah. You got an internet connection. Yeah.
yeah, I've spent my life traveling around the world as a musician for most of my. I've been around the world so many times. I mean, even in 2016, I went around the world 2.5 times in 2016, just getting booked at speaking dates and stuff. So it isn't like I need money to go traveling. If people want me to speak somewhere, they fly me over there, and I end up going traveling all over the place anyway, and I don't pay for it. People fly me to venues and stuff. So my life is kind of charmed in that way. I'm actually the perfect person to make, $40 million on Bitcoin or something, because if I did, I don't want it. There's nothing I want to spend it on. I'd put up billboards. I'd get airtime on TV. I would change the world if I had money like that.
Right.
Because I would just blast the truth everywhere. So that's what I mean. I mean, there's nothing that I really want, but I suppose a lot of people would find it difficult to live in a shed the way I do, but I love the shed. I really love it. A lot of people say, "Oh, why don't you get a proper house?" And I kind of really like it here. I've never been happier than where I live.
Yeah.
I live in a beautiful place. It's paradise. I've got peacocks out in the yard. I live 15 or 10 minutes from town, like the Gold Coast, and it's like the Gold Coast. It's like Las Vegas if you want it. I never ever go in there, but it's there. You can't even tell it's there where I live. I live in absolute paradise. I live like 1 hour from a major capital city. I live 1 hour from one of the major tourist resorts in the world. I live 15 minutes from world-class surfing beaches, 5 minutes from rock pools, rainforests and waterfalls. I'm 15 minutes from an international airport that can take me anywhere in the world, and I can go overseas for 18 months, 2 years, and I don't even have to lock my house or take my keys out of my car. So I don't want for anything, brother. I honestly don't. I've managed to land in this place, which is just it's kind of charmed. The universe has just put me in an area where I can just work and I can just get the truth out to people, and I don't actually want for anything.
Yeah. And you become much more
I don't have a
concerned.
lot.
You become much more concerned with just states of mind when you have yourself and, very few possessions. It's kind of the tiny house mindset, right? Or like, I also live in an Airstream right now, dude. And, it's got its pros and cons, but when you have less shit and you're not filling up storage lockers with crap you don't need, you are forcing yourself to be more concerned with like being philosophically astute, I would say, or just having your content of character.
Yeah, so the universe has kind of put me in this place, and I don't know how it's all happened. I've just kind of fallen here. And when I look at what my life was, and that's a wonderful thing for people to understand as well. Like life is an emotional mirror. I've tried to convey this to people. It's an emotional mirror. If you put yourself in the emotional state where the prayer has already been answered, then you attract that reality to yourself. You try to say that to people, and they say, "Oh, this is all New Age stuff." And no, it's not. Your life itself is a prayer. There's an electromagnetic conversation going on between you and reality that a lot of people don't understand is going on. And when I changed my perspective, when I was living in that homeless shelter and I changed my perspective and I realized that it's an emotional mirror, like even how I got the job as a radio host. I figured it would be good to be a radio host because I'd be able to get this information out to people, but I didn't know how to be a radio host. I didn't even know about internet radio, didn't know about any of that stuff, didn't even hardly know about, I'd only just discovered YouTube. I thought YouTube was a place where, high school kids uploaded their, home videos and stuff. I didn't know there was any truth movement on YouTube at the time. This was back in 2008. And I had this meditation. I realized everything is an emotional mirror. So I simply put myself in the emotional state where I was a radio host and I went about my everyday life. Didn't change anything, didn't pretend I was a radio host, just what would it feel like? What would the emotional state feel like if I was a radio host? It's like if you're thinking of what would it be like to be with your perfect partner? Put yourself in the emotional state. How would that actually feel to be with your perfect partner? You put yourself in that state and that person will walk into your life. And that's what I did. I put myself in the emotional state where I was a radio host, and within 6 weeks I was offered a job as a radio host by someone completely random. Didn't do anything at all to get the gig as a radio host, but just put myself in the emotional state. So it's that same thing. And since then I give unconditionally. I give when my intuition tells me to give. I give to people. Sometimes I'll buy the shopping of the groceries of the person next door to me because my intuition tells me I need to buy this person's groceries. I did that one time and this woman burst into tears. She said it was her. She was down to her last $20. She's never had anyone do anything so kind to her. I'd restored her faith in humanity, and this sort of stuff happens. And because I give to people unconditionally, the universe has provided this life for me. It's given me this place. It's given me the ability to be able to continue this message. This is how it works. And I'm not saying anything, oh, look, I'm this wonderful giving person, so I'd be rich. No, that's not what I'm saying. You're not hearing it if that's what you're thinking. I'm just talking about it, how it's an emotional mirror. If you give with no stake in the outcome, don't give because you want the universe to give back to you. Don't give because you think it's cool. Don't give because you want people to perceive you as being a giving person. Just listen to your intuition. Sometimes the best giving you can do to people is not giving to them, letting them heal themselves. That's the best thing you can give them sometimes, So you've got to listen to your intuition and be aware that this electromagnetic conversation is going on between you and reality. And it's all coming from your heart, this energy generator of your heart. I look at the body as this quantum instrument, and the heart being the power source and the brain being the quantum instrument that turns possibility into actuality depending on the input it gets from the heart. And the heart is the emotional input that it sends to your brain. This is what creates your reality, and it's a mirror. And since I started operating my life that way, everything has fallen into place and my life just seems to work. And even if bad stuff comes along to me now, it's not bad stuff. It's just a new part of the journey. It's just a new lesson for me to learn. There's a reason for it to happen because ultimately it's about the inner growth that happens in this experience. It's about the information that I gather along the way and what I take with me when I leave this realm. So that's kind of the way I've been looking at it. And since I started looking at it that way, my entire life has just fallen into place. That's what I've been trying to share with people over the years on the show.
Mirror is beautiful, man. It's so true that it's almost like what you say to somebody else, you're really saying to yourself, and what you're externally, what you're vibrating at, you could say, or how you're projecting thoughts. If thoughts are causative, how you're putting yourself out there is what is opening up to you, as you eloquently say. And I think as we have misalignments in the current time space vector of humanity, where we see that things are mirrored back to front, like you had excellently said that most things, most hierarchies of corporate or governmental or any sort of large hierarchical body is run by criminals, where things are mirrored back to front upside down. And I think that as things get worse and worse, or at least things come to the forefront, people can't stick their heads in the sand anymore, and they're shown what's really going on. And like you said, it's like you have to feel reality. And if things feel strange, even to people that aren't sure what's going on or aren't as developed to understand much of the concepts or what you're talking about, they can read into some of the information as being good information and empowering information. So it reminds me of that Gurdjieff quote, dude, where he said something about like how the world is an insane asylum and you just have to learn how to live in it. Right? It's like the let my will be done over let thy will be done type dynamic. But in terms of that, I mean, one of the things I wanted to just ask you about during this conversation and focus on is, we can have a little bit of an aspect on big religion after this, but in terms of big data and especially suppression, you're somebody that, as you have put out this information or this, truth signal to people have known who you are and have appreciated your work and liked your material, and you've had notice and been seen. And I think at some point you get to be a big enough blip on the radar that you seem to be a target for suppression by big data. So do you want to kind of open up on that and kind of speak to that a bit with your experience?
Oh, look, I've been suppressed the whole time. It took nearly 10 years for me to get 29,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel. Okay, nearly 10 years. And then in 18 months, it went from 29,000 to 170,000. Suddenly it opened up for some reason. But they've been suppressing my stuff for years. I mean, people could upload mirrors of my videos. I'll upload a video like The Awakening or whatever, my movie, and you'll see on my channel over 10 years, it's had like 80,000 views in 10 years, And you could find other channels that are within 2 or 3 months of them uploading it, it had 500,000 views. And that's a mirror of my original video. So you've got to question, what is my view count really on my video? And I've watched them drop my video view counts. Sometimes I'll watch a video and I'll look at it and go, oh, that's a good view count. Then I'll check in the morning, and it's 5,000 views less than what it was when I went to bed.
Really interesting.
So and I watch my subscribers. They go up about 10 subscribers and then drops down 10 subscribers, then up, down, then up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. They usually delete 5 to 10 subscribers per hour from my channel. I've watched them, and it still manages to climb at about a rate of about 100 subs a day. I've had people comment saying, Max, I had to subscribe to your channel 14 times today before it actually took. I have people emailing all the time telling me they've been unsubbed from my channel. So, yeah, I mean, they've been suppressing the data dramatically, and they always have. But I think they haven't shut me down completely, because, I mean, I think a lot of the reason they run all this is because they want to see what the current zeitgeist is. They want to see what the current level of human consciousness is, where we are, what we know. And if they shut us all down, they're not going to find out. They need to know what we're saying. They need to know who's saying the right things and who's actually got it. And someone like me that's putting out the kind of message I've got, I think they actually want to hear that message. So it'll just push me back. So a lot of other people won't hear it, but they get to know what I'm thinking and where I'm going, and other people as well. I mean, they get to know what they're thinking, where they're going. So they want to keep tabs on people, but they want to suppress the data at the same time. And really, when you look at it, with what's going on now with the data collection, the meta tags and all the stuff they're doing, the new laws, the whole World Wide Web, the whole internet, it's been a phishing exercise. I mean, 9/11 was a phishing exercise. That's why they made it so obvious that 9/11 was staged. I mean, anybody with the eyes to see can see that 9/11 was an inside job, absolutely. It was controlled demolition. However they did it, you can argue about whether it was thermite, whether it was directed energy, whether it was. They want you arguing about all that stuff, because you'll never get to the end of the rabbit hole if you do. It doesn't matter how they did it. What matters is that it wasn't 19 hijackers, and that's easily discernible by anybody with a working brain. So, but a lot of people did get it and a lot of people didn't get it. But the reason they made it so obvious, I think, is because they wanted to find out where we all are. They wanted to find out who was going to, go with the flow and who was going to question the narrative. So they put out all this stuff there to create the truth movement. I mean, the 9/11 attacks is really what spurned the rise of the truth movement. There was, a truth and freedom movement before then, but 9/11 is what saw it really, really take off in earnest. And it was a fishing exercise. And you think about it, the internet, the international net, and the World Wide Web. What does a net do? What does a web do? It catches things, that's what it's been about. And now they've got all this data retention and all this stuff, and they're blocking out all the information now and censoring people. They've staged these terror attacks so that they can identify people like you and I as promoting extremist ideologies and influencing people like Brenton Tarrant to go and shoot up a mosque in New Zealand because he's afraid of white genocide or whatever. So, all this stuff has been a play. And it's all been about trapping us. But at the same time, they want to have us still there. Certain people, they want us still there because they need to hear what we're saying. Because if they don't hear what we're saying, they're not going to know what we're thinking. They're not going to know how much we've got about it. This is why they like to have protests and stuff as well. They like you to do a protest in the street and go and march down the street and have a big meeting at the end and have speakers get up and say all this stuff because they want to hear what the speakers are going to say. And they listen to it and they go, oh, yeah, they're still there. They're still locked in the left-right paradigm. They haven't got the bigger picture yet. So it helps them gauge what we're thinking. They can't shut us down completely or else they wouldn't know. If they shut us down completely, it'd become too obvious. But I think it's, as you said before, it's an opportunity because it is getting in people's face. And with any real spiritual growth, for us to shine our light really, really brightly, your back's got to be pushed to the wall. You've got to be aware that the darkness is there. And a lot of people that we've been attempting to wake up are now becoming aware that the darkness is there. A lot of people in Australia are completely freaked out about where we're going with this whole social crediting and smart city being rolled out in Darwin, all the stuff that's going on here. So, to me, they're freaking out, and I don't think that they're going to win. But it's going to take the people standing up and hopefully the way it's being pushed in their face, well, it will wake them up. And the way they're pushing it out so quickly, I mean, I say bring it on because the quicker you push it out, the more you're waking people up. And you're going to be pushing it out anyway. So why leave us waiting for another 20 years? Just push it out now and let everybody see it because then they might stand up and kick you in the nuts. And that's what I'm hoping will happen.
Yeah, and I know it's such a hard question to ask, Max, because it's kind of like this, this could fractal out into much a bigger thing. But when we always say they, I mean, you have such a long experience with this. Is this, they could be like the, they live characters under those rubber masks or some non-corporeal, higher vibrational dark sorcerers. It's like, do you always find that the controllers of puppet strings is it more of an ethos, or do you think it's more, maybe speak to that a little bit, just however much you can, like who they is.
Well, that's the thing, there's so much information put out there that you can prove it's anybody you want. That's the thing. I could say it's the evil banking cartels. I could say it's the evil Jews. I could say it's the evil Freemasons. I could say it's aliens or reptiles or anything. Yes. If you want to believe any one of those things, you give me 48 hours, I'll prepare a presentation and I'll convince you that you're right because all the information's out there for me to do so. And they've put it out there for a reason. It just depends on what you want to believe. I've got my own suspicions about what may be going on, but there's suspicions that I can't prove, and I don't put them out there. I mean, who they may be. I don't put these concepts out there because they're just suspicions and I can't prove them, and I'm not locked into any belief that I'm right. I just allow things to unfold. And if I was to say who I think they are, then people would not take it as a suspicion and a speculation. They say, oh, Max said this.
Right.
And so you've got to be careful about what you say. I mean, I can prove it's anybody you want it to prove. What I can prove, but I don't need to really dig down any rabbit holes for, is that this is a people farm. It's a prison. The world is run by criminals. And once we establish freedom, then who they are will become self-evident. because we'll have access to information. We're too often arguing about these details, and to me it's a detail. And whatever they are, whoever they are, the facade that lies between us and them is the facade of government. We need to pull that down. This is a management system that is designed to control us. And really, you've got to look at the international government system as an international criminal cabal. They're all working together. The whole concept of nations and governments and borders and lines on map, this is all construct. It's one big people farm. You could think of each nation as being a separate pen, and we're being farmed. The whole human race is being farmed by people who we apparently elect to manage infrastructure for us. So we need to address this problem. And the problem we have addressing with that is that we can't find a way through the brick wall of terminal stupidity, which is the police force. Because even if you try to prosecute a politician, go to a police force and try to, the mayor's committed a crime, I'd like to have him investigated. They'll want to arrest you for daring to implicate the mayor in anything. You know what I mean? So these people are brain dead. The police, we used to think the police actually work for us and they're there to protect society. They're not. They're there to protect the politicians. They're there to make sure nobody steps out of line. They're not there to serve and protect anymore. They're there for law enforcement. Completely different to serving and protect. Their role has changed to one of law enforcement, and the so-called laws are not laws at all. They're simply legislation. They're stuff criminals write on paper. So that's the problem that we got. That's the issue that we face, and the only way we're going to get through that is if people simply down tools, stop complying with the system. I'd love to see the whole world stay home for a day. You imagine if the whole world stayed home for a day and didn't spend any money for a day. No credit cards, no money, no shops, nothing, didn't buy any gas. You want to be sitting there in Wall Street waiting for the numbers to change, and they wouldn't. They'd all have meltdowns, It'd send a shockwave around the world if we would do that. Simply stop complying with it. Stay home with your family. Stop supporting your own slavery. Stop doing all these useless things and running around all these useless jobs that we think we need to do, which actually mean nothing, It
does feel like there's kind of high level, as you might say, spiritual chess going on from almost us disavowing our own true selves, so we are forced to realign through these struggles, these systematic corruptions. And I mean, you can see it as you talk about police forces not doing what they're intended to do as things are mirrored back to front. I mean, you see that from every level of the system. You see that the defense industry is not a defense industry. It's an offense industry in terms of militaries. Or you see the sick care industry the healthcare industry is actually a sick care industry. Everything is so mirrored back to front and backwards upside down land that I think that's the kind of showing us our own true selves from the mirror sense, in terms of the disavowalment.
They tell us what they're doing, though. They tell us in all this stuff. You join the military, you're in the Army Corps. How do you spell Army Corps? Corpse. The Army Corps. Why do they spell it corpse? Why is it spelled like that when it's pronounced corps? Right. Because it's a corpse. It creates corpses. Why is a soldier called a soldier? Why is it a soul dyer? Why do they call it a soul dyer? Why they all wear sigils and 5-pointed stars and red ribbons? Why is it that every single military from every single country wears basically the same uniform with the same sigils, the same 5-pointed stars, the same occult symbolism all over it? They're all called soul dyers, and they all go out there to murder people that they've never met. A soldier is a normal person who's been taken to a camp and trained to be a psychopath, trained to be a murderer, and told that he now must go to a foreign country and kill people that he's never met, who he has no problem with at all, who have no problem with him. Just go in and shoot all these people and murder all these people because they are the enemy. It's ridiculous. It's training normal people to be murderers. The most damaging thing you can ever do for your soul is to join the military. It's a demented organization created by stupid people, for stupid people, in order for stupid people to go and do stupid things. That's what the military is. These are soul dyers. The most terminally stupid thing anybody could do is to join the military. Do not let anybody join the military. And if you're living with a soldier or anything, tell them to get another job or get another spouse. That's the way to change it. I mean, the military, as Henry Kissinger said, military men are dumb, stupid animals to be used as pawns in foreign policy. That is what the government thinks of soldiers. Soldiers it's a ridiculous organization. It's governments organizing people to be psychopaths and go to each other's countries to murder people in their own countries, to depopulate each other's countries. It's a stupid profession. Quit. If you're a soldier, quit. That's the best thing they could do for the world.
You know, the etymology of words is so key, and it almost seems like from again, like back to some high level metaphysical perspective, that it gets, getting kind of what you could say is some sort of sovereign soul to consent to something because they need our consent is giving us that kind of hint through the etymology, isn't it? It's like you consent to being this thing even though we've told you what it is subconsciously. And I think about that a lot because it does seem like it's never a low consciousness game, even from the good side of expansion of consciousness versus like dark things afoot, knowing they're not playing like a low consciousness game by any means. It's like they know all the tricks. And it seems like they've had eons of time to master these ways of manipulating, right? Through language or through just states of being or through, Hegelian dialectic or, various things that are revealed through aspects of conspiracy theories that are very, very old through time. And I think about that as people kind of realize these things and you speak to some of these things and hint on them and shine light on them, that it's very surprising how sophisticated some of the trickery is and
the thing is, a lot of people don't understand the words that they're speaking. They don't comprehend their own language. They only see the surface meanings of the words, like with soldier and army corpse. Why is it called a corpse, And it's like even the conversations I have when I've told to people, like when you're dealing with police officers and stuff, and they say to you, they ask you questions like, where do you live? They want your address, where do you live? And I'll say, well, is that a trick question? I live. What do you mean, where do I live? Yeah. I live in this vessel. You're asking me from my address. If a cop asks you where do you live, and you say, I live at 20 on 20 West Century Boulevard, LA. Okay, well, you're not there now, so therefore you're not alive now. So therefore you're a corpse. Therefore you're under my jurisdiction. You're telling them that you only live at that address. You're telling them that you're not alive now. What are you, stupid?
Yeah,
that's the thing. And they say, well, this obviously you're an idiot because you don't think you're alive at the moment because you didn't understand what I asked you. I asked you where you live, and you're telling me you live at that address, and you're not at that address at the moment. So therefore, you don't live at the moment. See, we don't ever think of it that way.
So much power in words. Another classic one is the "Do you understand?" which means technically, do you stand under me? Right. So you can always say like,
exactly.
I overstand, or the just the aspects of sovereignty in corporate fiction in terms of name. I totally, that's something I could happily ask you about for 20 hours about like how to navigate, the legal system. And another one that I love too, that history is, his story, the patriarchal stance on history through time. And, mystery is my story. So it's like seek out the mystery of your own life. And it's more about like the actual true authenticity of your life through the mystery, my story.
Exactly, because your story is hidden from you, even through the word mystery. It's hidden from you. And it's truly understanding the words. I mean, I've even had a police officer tell me once, he was trying to get me to do something. He said, it's the law. And I said, what law? And he said, you're in the state of Queensland. When you're in the state of Queensland, you've got to abide by the laws of the state of Queensland. And I said to him, well, what is the state of Queensland? What is that? Are you referring to lines on a map? Because I'm not standing on a map at the moment. I was in a state of quiet enjoyment before you came along, and now I'm in a state of confusion at your claim that I'm in a state of Queensland. What is the state of Queensland? And he walked away because it's a mental state. When you're in the state of California, you are obliged to abide by the laws of that state because you are in that mental state. Yes. But there is no California. It's simply lines on a map. What is the state of California?
It's a fiction, and you are consenting to conducting commerce by admitting that, right? Like that you are
exactly. I am now in that mental state where you can. I believe you have authority, and I believe in these lines on this map, and I believe all of this fiction. Yes. I'm an idiot. Is basically what you're saying. I'm in a state of California. I'm not in a state of clear consciousness at all.
And you know what you're doing, Max, is you're asking, so you're as king, right? That's another one. Like just by asking questions and usually playing the why game is a good one. Ask most people why, and they can't carry that more than two or three whys down the why spiral before they don't have an answer. And are you familiar with this? There's a really great. I don't know if they're still doing it, but it was a group of guys talking about, the legal system and navigating the hall of mirrors that is the legal system and all the trickery afoot with it. It was called Creditors in Commerce. Are you familiar with this? Did you ever hear about it?
I did hear about it, but I'm not completely familiar with it.
They had a really good thing where they talked about how, you want to approach just your life in general and your spiritual growth as being a creditor in life instead of a debtor, and how the vast majority of people, especially people that we could say are on a descendant path or a latent path or some sort of asleepness, are essentially debtors. And when you're presented with a question or a problem in life, there's essentially four doors you could go down. And the first two make you a creditor and the second two make you a debtor. And the first two doors are you can either accept something, you can either conditionally accept something, or you can argue or go silent, right? So when you are talking to a police officer and you're asking him questions, you're essentially conditionally accepting his questions, right? So you're still remaining a creditor, you're still standing in honor, and you're still behaving well through those interactions by just acknowledging who you are and where we're going and what you're doing. And it's just like if they say, "Are you Max?" and you just say something like, "Well, I am that I am." You look at yourself from the higher spiritual perspective and realize you're not entirely your body, and you're always standing in honor and asking questions. It's definitely a nice way to navigate things and to always try and remain in honor and be empowered.
Well, yeah. I mean, even with the Max Egan, I mean, even saying, I mean, if they look at your license and whatever, very often they'll do that and they'll read your name out. Say, Max Egan, is this you? And I go, no, that's a piece of plastic that you're holding in your hand.
Yeah.
I'm over here.
Yeah.
And are you Max Egan? No, I'm not. That's a sound. It's a name. It's a audio thing. I mean, it's words. It's ink spots on a piece of paper. I can't possibly be Max Egan. That's a calling that I answer to, but I'm not a name. How can I possibly be a name? Because a name is an audio sound or words on paper. I'm living flesh. Right. I can't be a name.
Or
you could
acknowledge.
Even as soon as you claim ownership of the name, and even with my real name, I mean, they'll say, "Is this your name?" And I'll say, I mean, they'll ask me what my name is, and I'll say my name is Man. I say that without frivolity or vexation, based on peer-reviewed anthropological information. If you have a problem with it, take it up with an anthropologist. Are you after the legal name? If you are after the legal name, I can give you the legal name, but it's not my name. The legal name is a corporate entity created via an agreement entered into between my parents and the government. It's a calling that I answer to, but I don't own it. The government owns it. When you ask me for my name, all I can give you is Man, because of the word my. I mean, my stipulates ownership. And if you are asking me to claim ownership of the legal name, well, you're asking me to commit fraud. Isn't that entrapment? I mean, you're asking me to claim ownership of something that I have no ownership of. I've got my birth certificate in my pocket here. If you want to look at it, it's got my parents' signature and it's got stamps all over it. You won't find my signature on there anywhere. It's got nothing to do with me. It's simply a corporate entity that was created so the government has a name for me. If that's the name you're asking for, you should ask, what is the name the government has for you, or what is the name of the corporate entity created via the agreement entered into between your parents and the government? I can give you that name if that's what you want, but don't ask me to claim it as mine because it's not my name.
Would you acknowledge having some sort of paramount security interest in that name? That's kind of the next dynamic, right? Is like,
no, I have no interest in the name at all. It's a name I use to navigate the corporate system. I don't even use that legal name. I use Max Egan, which isn't my legal name.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah.
Max is my middle name. It was the legal name of my middle name. I chose to use that name because that's the name of my uncle who was shot down over the British Channel. Egan is my son's middle name, and I choose to use that because what I do is out of respect for my son. And that's the name that I use for everything that I do. The legal name that is my actual legal name, the only purpose that serves is that I have a car license and a registration so that I don't have to deal with brain-dead morons every 5 minutes when I'm driving around the place. I can have freedom of movement, and I have a passport in that name. That's the only things that I have that exist in that legal name. and that legal name has no online persona whatsoever.
Right,
And
right.
Max Egan has no real world persona whatsoever. And I choose not to use that legal name or have anything to do with it, except if I have to navigate that corporate world, which I do as little as possible.
Right, as little as humanly possible. I know somebody that did a full disavowal of their social security number and everything in the United States, and they actually had to kind of end up backpedaling because they found that it was so limiting. So I know that it's
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I like
yeah,
to be able to travel. I like to be able to go overseas. I could sit here and make a stand and completely separate myself from the system and stand here as a completely solitary rock, person standing on a rock in the middle of the forest and no one would hear me, and
yeah,
I'd think it was all really wonderful. But I'm not going to reach anybody. So you've got to kind of walk with one foot in the fiction and one foot in reality in order to wake people up to the fiction that they're walking in. Otherwise, you just have no effect at all. So you've got to be sensible about how you approach this.
right. And so you do have a passport, right? So and
I,
then
I have a passport and a driver's license and a car registration, and that's the only ties that I have to the system at all. I've never filled out a tax form. I don't vote. I've never had anything to do with the system in any way, shape, or form apart from that. When I left school in the third year of high school, I became a musician. I lived on the outside of society for a good 25, 30 years doing that. And so I never had to pay taxes or anything like that. I got paid cash in hand for all that stuff. And I've just never done it. I've just never participated in that system.
and with all the problems of every country, and I mean, obviously you are in Australia. Doesn't Australia have kind of a nice thing in terms of you're not taxed on income until you make above a certain amount, right? So if you
I have no clue.
oh,
I have
okay.
no clue.
Okay,
I
right.
have no clue. I just don't participate in it. I
I
have no
understand.
clue.
I understand, man. Yeah, well, thanks for that insight. It's nice to hear, and I find too that I'm somebody that also uses my middle name, man. And at some point in my life, I just decided that I liked the dynamic of my middle name, and I guess I almost didn't realize that subconsciously it was at a kind of a point in my life where I was rebooting myself, and in some slight transmutation from version, you could argue maybe 1.0 to 2.0, or into some next stage of life. And I think that we do find that sometimes our names are something that we are changing or using a name that's kind of the name we go by versus the name that we originally started with. So when you did have that adjustment to your name that you kind of took on as a nom de plume, was that something that you found has just benefited you, right? By going by this name that you feel is more right for you and works better for your behavings in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It completely changed my life. It completely changed even when I look at the numerology of the name, the numerology is actually much better, which I didn't even think about when I did it. All these people say, "Oh, Max Egan, that's 33, rah rah rah, shill." And actually, it breaks down to 6, and it's Maxwell Egan, which is actually an 8, so it's not a 6 anyway. But anyway, but an 8's actually quite a powerful number. But I never even thought about that when it happened. But Max was all my. I mean, I always felt more comfortable with Max than my actual first name, so that was used a lot in my life anyway. And
Huh.
yeah.
Yeah, so just I'll probably keep this as a little extra juicy Patreon extension. So I know that you've spoken so much, man, about, I oftentimes use this reference of big anything restricts human consciousness, and from a non-political perspective of whether or not whatever any political affiliation somebody has, regardless of its big government, big corporations, or big science, even what science tells us about the nature of reality and the spatial model of the universe. But a big one that is, I almost think, is the largest restrictor of human consciousness is big religion. And so I find that it's, as an American, we live in a country that has this bizarre dynamic where in one of the most intellectually backwards places of the United States, the Congress, our members of our Congress have to swear allegiance to this foreign state of Israel, which is a very weird dynamic that we have to do this to any sort of foreign entity. And I know that you've spoken a lot on the subject of the dynamic of Israel and Palestine. So can you just kind of give some insight as to that dynamic and how that shows us what's going on in the larger
Look,
perspective
Israel
of things?
has such incredible influence over the United States. It's sickening. It really is. And Israel is an illegitimate state. I mean, it's not even run by the people who say they are. I mean, they're not even the real Jews, the people who run Israel. And the Jews lived in Palestine, and the Palestinians and the Israelis got along fine before they attempted to turn the place into a state. And a lot of the real Jews in the world don't think that the state of Israel should be there anyway. It's actually against their faith for the state of Israel to be there. And it has an inordinate amount of influence over the United States, again, through religion. And it's again because people aren't really looking at their religion. They're not really looking at the Bible and what it says, and it apparently that there is this incredible need to support the state of Israel, which is simply not what's said in the Bible. And I don't trust the Bible anyway. You look at the Bible, the King James version of the Bible. I mean, King James, come on, this guy's the king, really, the king. I mean, I think anybody who thinks they're a king is a moron anyway. Just the fact that you believe that you've got the ability to rule by your blood. I mean, who the hell do you think you are? Well, just I was born as the ruler. Oh, grow up, mate, really. I mean, anybody who wants to think that they're a king, I mean, we don't need these people. The whole, and King James, why do we think we're going to hear the right thing from King James? Even when I look at the Bible, I kind of think, William Shakespeare. And when I think William Shakespeare, I think Bacon Society. So I kind of wonder about the King James Bible, where it really came from and whether that's really what it's all about at all. And, even when I look at the ancient, I mean, I've looked into a lot of ancient history recently and Tartaria and all this sort of stuff. I think that all religions work together as a single faith, and that something happened reasonably recently that divided them all and put them against each other. I don't trust religion at all. And even, if you really want to get into the Jesus character and all that, there are a lot of people will debate whether he was real or whether he wasn't or whatever. And I will put it out there that if he was real, then he was an activist. He was an anarchist. He was a political activist, and you wouldn't know about him if he wasn't. And he showed you the path, and he told you the path was through him, but it wasn't in waiting for him to come back and save you. It was in doing what he did and walking that path, being an anarchist, disconnecting yourself from the system. And Jesus spoke out against the government, against the whole system for his whole life, and he got away with doing it right up until he spoke out about the banking cartels. And he went to the temples and he overturned the tables of the money changers. When he did that, he was dead within a week. So that gives you a pretty good indication of the Jewish money changers and the control they have over the system. And that's why Muslims have been vilified so much as well, because there's no user in the Muslim world. There's no interest in the Muslim monetary system. So, the whole Jewish monetary system is the problem. That is the cause of scarcity. That is the cause of most of the wars, the cause of most of the animosity that humans conduct against each other, because they're kept in an artificial state of scarcity due to this monetary system. And that's an interesting thing, and it's a huge influence over the world. And that's where it comes from. It comes from these people. It's an unfortunate reality.
As somebody that is an American, obviously I'm in California on this side of the call. I'm savvy enough to know that most of the American Middle East occupations and nonsensical blood and treasure spillings that we've had in the Middle East are secretly very much in alliance with Israel.
They're all Israel.
On behalf
They're
of
all Israel. All American Middle Eastern foreign policy is run by Israel. All of the wars America's been fighting in the Middle East are wars for Greater Israel, all of them.
Yeah, bonkers, man. And it's like just the fact that is even the dynamic. And if you start saying truths like that in the United States, it's like people go mental, right? So it's like that's a perfect example, just to wrap up this conversation, as a truthful reality that if you are willing to look at something and really analyze it, then you can fix it. And if people don't, obviously for as many people that are listening to this, there's probably 1,000 others who are unwilling to even hear what we're saying. But times are changing, especially when you see in the United States the approval level of Israel from younger generations of people. It's like the Kool-Aid is drying up in the United States about that, and that's encouraging in some regard. So I appreciate you just kind of shedding some light on that. I know you've spoken about that extensively elsewhere, so we could send people to some of your talks about that. And I always like to shine a light on the fact that we never, or at least from my point of view, I never denounce entire groups of people. Obviously, there's groups of people.
Not all the Jews in Israel support what is going on. They don't, and not all the Jews around the world support what's going on. But the people that are running Israel at the moment are Khazars. They're not actual Jews. These are white-skinned Europeans that took up the mantle of Judaism. They all come from the once nation of Khazaria, which existed between the Caspian Sea and the Red Sea and around near the Caucasus. This is where they come from. They're not the real Jews, And Israel at the moment is milking the United States for the tune of $11 million a day in aid, which it's using to carry out genocide against the Palestinians. And Benjamin Netanyahu himself said, I think in 2002, he said, we will bleed the United States for everything that we can, and then it can blow away like dust. That's what they care about, the United States. So the people of America really need to wake up to how they're being played by this podunk little country, which is not supporting their biblical terms of what they think Israel should be. Really, all you've got to do is go and look at some of the quotes for people who are Christians, who really want to get into it, and they really want to do their due diligence on Israel and what it all really means. Go to your Bible and look at Revelation 2.9, Jesus Christ's words when he said, I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich, and I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews, but are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. That is who is in control of Israel. And if you're a Christian out there, you're an American Christian, and you think you need to be supporting this country, what you are supporting is the synagogue of Satan. And all you can need to confirm that is by looking at the state of your own country and what America is becoming due to the inordinate amount of influence that this country has over the United States.
Yeah, and just the dynamic of buying into that is so nonsensical. It's just like it's nice to have people speak out from the point of view of it, and I especially get energized when I see like logical Jews speaking out against Israel. Just like you would see some more balanced Muslims speaking out against fundamental radicalized Muslim morons, or anybody that is in within a system of some sort of traditional orthodoxy. So that kind of gives energy too. But thank you for your insights on that, mate. I appreciate it. But where can as we kind of wind this down, man? I mean, if you have any final thoughts you want to share, and then also maybe how people can get in contact with you, or where they can find you and see your information, or other places that you might be disseminating information on that are more decentralized, so that you're not always in one place. That's going to
I think they're going to shut us down wherever we go, brother. It's sort of, my website's getting hassled a bit these days too. But you'll find everything about me on thecrowhouse.com. You'll find all links to my YouTube channels, to my BitChute. If I get closed down on the Crowhouse YouTube channel, I'll move back to my AOD Scarecrow channel. If that gets closed down, I'll move to BitChute permanently. But you'll find everything about me on thecrowhouse.com, and just learn to think for yourself, people. And we can take this world back. Don't be afraid of standing up for yourselves, and don't think that if you keep your head down, it's all going to go away. It's not. It's just going to get worse. And the government will continue to push. They'll push as far as we let them push. Bullies will always push as far as they can until you tell them to stop. And it's about time we told them to stop and started pushing back. So let's all step up to the plate, because if we don't, things are just going to get worse. So now's the time, folks. If you don't make a stand now, there's a good chance your children may want to make a stand, and it's going to be so much harder for them then. They'll get their heads chopped off as soon as they try. So if you care about your kids, stand up for yourself now. It's time that everybody heeded the call and took this world back.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about being a creditor. So, in order to facilitate commerce, we've created fictions. We call them corporations, we call them persons, we call them nations, we call them states, counties, cities, all matter of vessels. And through our creation of these fictional vessels, we facilitate modern commerce. And in commerce, you always have a debtor and a creditor in any transaction. Now, that role can shift from moment to moment. If I provide consideration in a contract and you have yet to perform, what does that make me? What does that make you? Creditor, debtor, until you've performed. And let's say your performance, by the nature of the contract, affects some performance or some condition by which now I must perform. For instance, I love the example of going out to a restaurant, right? So we walk in, we sit down, the waiter or server is now under obligation to take your order, bring you beverages, bring you food. But once they've achieved the obligations and provided their consideration, it's now up to you to provide consideration. In some form or another, you can maybe wash dishes. The server won't be happy with that. But if you provide cold, hard Federal Reserve notes and tip at least 20%, they'll be happy. Okay? With these fictions we've created, and fictions always exist on the timeline, right? Past, future. They don't exist in the now. Fictions are, by their very nature, dead. They don't exist in the now. They have no living essence behind them. So if they are fictions, and we are the driving force moving fictions in commerce, and by moving I mean literally giving them the commercial energy that it requires for fictions to conduct transactions, what's that make us in a creditor-debtor relationship? The creditor? Fictions are always the debtor. See, the beauty of the system we've created is that the corporations are always going to be subject to your authority. They exist by virtue of you. You granted them into existence. You granted this government into existence. So in a creditor-debtor relationship, if we realize that the fictions can never make a claim, so what care I of the United States coming after me? Well, the United States is a fiction. What care I if IBM come after me? IBM's a fiction. I can inflict or affect control over any fiction in any moment. I don't need a public record to do it. Public records are useful in the form of recorded liens and things like that, but I can create a contract by which the fiction can never perform, thereby creating a breach, thereby creating a lien right, thereby creating creditor-debtor relationship whereby I am in control of the fiction. And that is possible in any moment with any fiction. The fictions are not controlling you. If you put your authority in the gods of money and the gods of government, and you believe man's law to be the absolute authority, well, then you've granted and conveyed that. You've granted that authority. You're in agreement. You've granted that to them. By choice. Ooh, interesting little... Here I go. I'm going to talk about some foreign policy. So this may be interpreted as, I support coups and the destruction of nations and the people therein. Anyone familiar with Chavez in Venezuela? Is he a good guy or a bad guy? Very good. You're learning. That'd be a judgment. So, let's look at, anybody ever heard of or seen any materials by, I forget, economic hitman guy? Yeah. Okay, so you're familiar with the processes of the economic hitman. How they would exert their control through the banking system to take over nations. Does anyone know what happened in Venezuela when they tried that? It didn't work. Why is that? Was it because of him, or was it because of the people of Venezuela? The people of Venezuela were too conscious to be tricked by their media, by their corporations. They realized they were the ultimate authority. They had determined that Chavez was the guy they wanted. What was so evil about him? Oh, he wanted to take the money that they were making off of oil and everything and give it back to the people. That's pretty evil. Especially if your God is corporatism. If that's your belief system, corporatism, that's bad. Even if your belief system is capitalism, that's a bad thing. Give the people control of their resources? Oh. But the economic hitmen have had success doing it in many other nations. The Shah of Iran in the 1950s, or our implant of the Shah of Iran, we got rid of, what was his name? I want to say Melchizedek, but that's not it. It's, I forget his name, the democratically elected president of Iran. What was he going to do? He was going to do the same thing Chavez did. Nationalize the resources of the country. And the people, by their debtor nature, fell for the trick. Who's responsible? Can we blame the bankers for what happened in Iran? Can we blame Kermit Roosevelt? Can we blame the CIA, the MI6? Can we blame the United States for what happened in Iran? You can? You can. Okay? But who ultimately is responsible for what happened in Iran? The people of Iran. Because in reality, Kermit Roosevelt ain't that powerful. One man, give me a break. So, I think there's a contradiction in fighting for peace. And I think often we take the, you guys have heard the quote by, or the parable, whatever you want to call it, of the anti-war protesters approaching Mother Teresa to march against war. And she said, no. Because law of polarity, you're creating a fight.